Have you ever seen a deity descend to earth? I have seen it before, it's not as you imagine. Keywords of the novel. Darkness, please come down to earth without pop-ups. Darkness, please come down to earth. Download the complete text, and Darkness, please come down to earth to read the latest chapters. Chapter 1. Wedge. You are listening at novelfull.audio. Chapter 1. Wedge. Luoshen Mountain. A rare heavy fog enveloped the entire mountain. Inside, in a dilapidated Taoist temple, two men stared in terror at the decaying wooden gate in the courtyard. Both of them are suffering from varying degrees of injuries, but they can no longer afford it. Outside the door, there were a series of chaotic gunshots and the roar of unknown wild beasts. Every time there was a roar outside, the two people in the cave trembled with fear. A slightly younger man was trembling as he was reloading the official rifle in his hand. After the last round was played, he gritted his teeth and said to his companions beside him, "Third brother, if old 7 and old 9 really can't hold on, I'll drag that damn thing. You take the opportunity to flip through the window and run out. Your hands and feet need to be agile. I can't hold on for a long time." As he spoke, the man opened his clothes and revealed a grenade pinned to his waist. At this moment, the man known as the third brother shook his head bitterly. He handed the man who was speaking his 20-shot D.made refuter gun, pointing to his bleeding wound and saying, "Lao Lu, my injury is heavier than yours, there's no chance to go out anymore. Previously, it was your brothers who charged for several brothers, but now it's third brother's turn. Remember, if you can really escape, don't go see boss die. This matter is rotten in my stomach, don't mention it to anyone. Find a place where no one is around and hide, find a woman to give birth to a man and a half woman. Live the rest of our lives for us." At this point, Sangu reached out and took the rifle from Lao Lu's hand, then pulled out the grenade from his waist and held it in his own hand. At this moment, the outside of the Taoist temple suddenly fell silent. The incessant gunfire, the roar of beasts, and the sound of rolling and running disappeared without a trace. The two people in the Taoist temple became even more nervous. The muzzle of the long and short guns was facing the door, and Lao Lu boldly said to the door, "Old 7 and old 9, how are you two doing? Just say something, let me and my third brother know that you two are still alive." After shouting several times, there was no response outside the door. The two people in the cave began to feel guilty. Third brother pulled the bolt of the gun, sighed deeply, and then said to old 6. "Old 7 and old 9 may not be able to deal with the monsters outside. Lao Lu, you follow Sangu to break out. I will pave the way for you, and you will run whenever there is a chance. Remember to burn some paper for your brothers and sisters during holidays and festivals in the future." While speaking, the third brother twisted open the safety cover of the grenade and wrapped the cable around his little wooden finger. He held a rifle in one hand and a grenade in the other, slowly walking towards the door. Lao Lu couldn't bear to see Sangu die here. Just as he was about to rush ahead, a strange noise finally came from outside the gate. It seems that someone is dragging something heavy outside the door, walking step by step towards the Taoist temple. The nerves of the two suddenly became tense again. The third brother and the sixth brother were both from the Fuxing Society, and although they were both injured, their movements were still swift. When they saw the situation was not right, they immediately retreated to the corner. Both of them held guns and aimed towards the direction of the door. Almost as they raised their guns and aimed, there was a loud bang. A dark figure smashed through the door, flew into the Taoist temple, and landed near where the two of them were hiding. Before Sangu and Lao Lu could react, the figure that had fallen stood up, swaying and swaying. After seeing the figure, the two of them were shocked and their hearts jumped wildly. This person is completely naked, except for his clothes being pulled out. A bloody and sticky person walked towards Lao Lu's position, opening his mouth and babbling as he walked. "Let me die." Under extreme panic, old 6 quickly pulled the trigger, and the bullet accurately focused on the blood man's heart, causing him to fall to the ground and die out of breath. At the moment of the gunshot, Lao Lu saw the mouth of the bloody man speaking, with 2 golden teeth. Among the dozen or so people who went up the mountain, only the 9th son, Han Saihu, had 2 large golden teeth set in place. Lao Jiao is the most skilled among these people. I never expected him to die so tragically in the end. Killing one's own companion with one's own hands is more painful than killing oneself with Lao Lu. Sangu also recognized that Blood Man was old 9. At this point it was too late to comfort old 6 who was shooting. At the same time, a monster slowly crawled to the door. The location of the monster was backlit, coupled with the heavy fog outside the door, so 3rd brother and 6th brother could only vaguely see the outline of the monster. It is a person magnified 2 or 3 times, who is said to be human but cannot walk on both feet. It is naked and crawls through the door like a 4-cornered reptile. The 2 of them recognized that this was the monster hiding in the fog, which killed more than 10 of their brothers. The monster is still dragging and biting a dead person in its mouth. It seems that it is likely the 7th Prince Wang Hao who is with the 9th Prince. Seeing that this monster had killed all of his dozen or so brothers, the 2 of them did not hesitate and almost simultaneously pulled the trigger of their long and short guns. As gunshots rang out, the monster suddenly shook its head and threw the body of old 7 in its mouth towards their hiding place. While Sangu and Lao Lu dodged, the monster's limbs kicked on the ground and its body darted forward, disappearing into the air. Sangu and Lao Lu had experience of confronting monsters before and knew that they had already taken action against them. After avoiding the body of Lao Qi, he immediately raised his gun and pulled the trigger on the path that the monster might be rushing towards. Pop 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 pop, just as he fought 4 or 5 times, Sangu heard a loud bang, and then Lao Lu, who was standing next to him, was knocked out horizontally. As Lao Lu flew out, the giant-like monster had already appeared in front of Sangu out of thin air. At this moment, the frightened 3rd brother finally saw the monster's appearance. A face with a blue face and fang teeth. Sangu had seen this face before, and in an ancient painting circulating in the Longhu Mountain Heavenly Master Mansion, there is a picture of a wicked ghost. The evil spirits and monsters inside are exactly the same. Thinking that Arhat, the 18th member of the Renaissance Society, had almost died in the hands of this monster, the 3rd brother was already determined to die. He held the monster's thigh tightly and pulled off the cord of the grenade in his hand. With a loud bang, the smoke and dust caused by the explosion filled the air. At this moment, Lao Lu, who had just been knocked out, stood up unsteadily. He had several broken ribs, but he managed to save his life. Thinking of 18 people searching for immortals on the mountain, only I survived in the end. Lao Lu's sadness started from his heart and he couldn't help but burst into tears. But just as he cried a few times, he was hit by the noise coming from the center of the smoke and dust in the room. When Lao Lu stopped his grief and looked towards the place where the sound was coming from, he saw the giant-like monster standing still amidst the slowly dissipating smoke and dust. This is a hand grenade made in country D. It can even kill an elephant. Why can't it kill this monster? Just as Lao Lu was about to find the dropped shell gun, the monster also noticed him and was turning its head to look towards Lao Lu. In just the blink of an eye, the monster appeared in front of Lao Lu out of thin air, opening its massive mouth full of fangs and biting at the neck of the person in front of him. As Lao Lu was about to die in the monster's mouth, a slow voice came from the entrance. Evil obstacles. The monster trembled at the sound and turned to look at the entrance. I saw a man wearing a blue long shirt standing at the door. After seeing the man's appearance, the monster immediately became frightened. It grabbed Lao Lu and stood in front of it, seemingly using him as a hostage, shouting loudly at the man in the blue shirt. At the entrance the man stared coldly at the monster, then reached out his hands and scratched his thumb with his nails. Then he dropped a drop of fresh blood onto the ground beneath his feet. After seeing this drop of blood, the monster underwent another transformation. It was like a big smoker seeing a big cigarette cream, starting to scratch his ears and cheeks, while tears, saliva, and nasal mucus flowed uncontrollably. After seeing the monster's reaction, the man in the blue shirt said calmly, "What are you waiting for? This kind of opportunity won't happen again." The monster seemed to understand the man's words. It kept panting heavily, and after spinning in place for a few laps, it could no longer tolerate the temptation of that drop of blood. After a roar, the monster shook off old six in its hand, and with a flash of its body, it rushed to the man in the blue shirt. It lay on the ground, sticking out a red tongue that was 1 foot long, licking the drop of blood on the ground. Just as the monster was desperately licking the blood, the man in the blue shirt suddenly lifted his leg and stomped hard on its head. With the sound of ripe watermelons falling to the ground and exploding in the room, the monster, unable to cause damage with bullets or grenades, was unexpectedly crushed in the head by this casual kick. The person in the blue shirt didn't even look at the monster corpse under his feet. He slowly turned his head and said to old Lu, who had already been frightened and stunned, "It's time for us to talk." End of this chapter. Chapter 2. Luoshen Mountain. You are listening at novelfull.audio. Chapter 2. Luoshen Mountain. Little brother, this is a good thing. It was a tribute to Emperor Qianlong back then. This precious thing is called a dragon whip. Here to put it in a mysterious way, my father is 79 years old this year, and it was thanks to this treasure that he gave birth to a younger brother for me last year. My son is 20 years older than my younger brother, an old farmer squatting on the ground, spitting stars flying wildly, selling me a pile of hay like medicinal herbs in front of him with a mischievous smile. I patted my chest and said, "Man, I'm only 20.6, in the year of the war, there's no need for this thing." The old farmer still didn't give up, holding up hay and saying, "You don't need to go home and ask your dad. How about giving birth to a little brother for you? The two of you can be companions. You were bullied, your younger brother helped you fight before I could continue grinding my teeth with this old guy." A chubby guy in sportswear behind me shouted loudly at me, "Shen Lian! Get on the car. Hurry up, everyone in the car is waiting for you." Wang Pengzi's shout was considered to have saved me. He threw a cigarette to the old farmer, and then I ran over and followed him onto the bus of the travel agency. My name is Shen Lian, and I am a salesperson for a small company in northeast China. Wang Pengzi, who just called me to get on the car, is the sales manager of the company. 2 days ago, I experienced a major event in my life. My newlywed wife and I have the crystallization of our love. It was also on this day that the company notified me to come to this small place called Luoshen County with Wang Pengzi to demand payment. Although unwilling, for the sake of the scattered silver every month, we still took a day and night train with Wang Fatty and arrived in Luoshen County. I thought this was a difficult task, and both of us were even prepared to spend a long time here. All the bedding have been packed. As long as the other party doesn't pay, they will lay a floor in their office. Unexpectedly, the demand for payment went quite smoothly this time. Neither Wang Pengzi nor I put in much effort, but the other party's boss transferred the payment to our company's account on the same day. Neither of us expected it to be so convenient, and we didn't even have train tickets ready to go back. Because Huyuan County is a small place, there will be a train home 2 days later. Anyway, the payment has also been returned, and it's also idle. Wang Fatty decided to take me here to play for 2 days. He spent 100 yuan and signed up for a one-day trip with 2 local people taking lunch. At this moment, I was sitting on a tourist bus, with most of the passengers being elderly people in their 60s and 70s. After listening to the tour guide talk about middle-aged and elderly health products for a while, I finally began my day of travel. After visiting several shopping points such as the Jade Workshop in Luoshen County, Beishan Stone Style Street, Xingda Healthcare, and Li Wankai Calligraphy and Painting Academy, we finally arrived at today's only free tourist attraction. The tour guide spoke with a loudspeaker in the bus. Dear group members, today we are going to visit the 5th tourist attraction. Luoshen Mountain 1A level tourist attraction. Luoshen Mountain is a famous tourist destination both far and near. As the name suggests, there have been more than one people who have met immortals here since ancient times. What Erlang Shenyang Jian, totally Tianwang the 3rd, 6th, and 7th fairies of the Queen Mother have all stayed at Luoshen Mountain. What else is there, LV Dongbin and He Xiangu among the 8 immortals? Before the tour guide could finish speaking, Wang Pengzi suddenly interjected and said. Big sister, it's too much you said they are a pair of lonely old immortals who came to work in the deep mountains and forests. Shouldn't it be time to drill into the fields of corn later? A good mythological story that makes you sift through emotions. After Wang Pengzi finished speaking, the people in the car burst into laughter. Wang Pengzi and I didn't spend a penny in the previous payment stages, and the tour guide naturally didn't have a good expression. She gave Wang Pengzi a glare and said. You outsiders understand that this Luoshen mountain has truly descended from immortality. Before causing trouble with the little devils, the leader of the big spy surnamed Dai in the puppet government even sent spies to search for immortals. Dozens of people went up, but almost all of them died. If you don't believe it, just come back and ask an old man in Luoshen County. You all know I followed suit and said. Have you found the immortal yet? Of course I couldn't find it. Before the tour guide could answer, Wang Pengzi spoke up and said. Don't even see whose world it is now. They really found it. What's the deal? Sister, how did LV Dongbin and He Xiangu end up? Is the child born a girl or a boy? As Wang Pengzi spoke, the tourist bus had already entered the winding mountain road. The driver honked the horn, parked the car on the roadside, and turned to the tour guide, saying. It's foggy now. This mountain road is foggy and difficult to walk along, otherwise we can get up the mountain from here. Anyway, there's no need to go to the mountaintop. Walk halfway up the mountain to see the footprints of immortals. There's nothing more on this mountain. If it doesn't work out, let's just go back today. This itinerary is just a free attraction at Mount Shinshan, and the previous ones were all about some consumer projects. If even this only real tourism project is cut off, then it's really indescribable. After hesitating for a moment, the tour guide still asked the driver to open the car door and said. Ladies and gentlemen, this is the last stop of today, the famous 1A level scenic spot Luoshen Mountain. Due to the weather, we are going up the mountain here. Let's go up the mountain early and come down at a glance. Do you see the steps at the intersection? Legend has it that these are the stairs and steps personally crafted by the barefoot immortal when he descended to earth. Following the group members from the travel agency, Wang Pengzi stepped on the steps with his feet, then turned around and made a face at me, saying. The cement ground built by barefoot immortal. I also laughed along and said to Wang Pengzi. Just listen to a joke, you take it seriously. What is Luoshen Mountain? The moon has gone up. Who really saw Chang'e? This is just a gimmick. There's no such thing as a fairy, tiger, or dog. We followed the tour guide and walked up the cement steps towards the mountain. This Luoshen Mountain is not high. It seems that you can walk to the top of the mountain in less than an hour. We're going to the location on the mountainside, and we can actually make it back before dark. But shortly after we hiked up the mountain, the originally thin layer of mist also became much thicker. When our group reached halfway up the mountain, our sight dropped to the point where we could only see the scenery from a dozen meters away. Even the air we breathe is damp and humid. End of this chapter. Chapter 3. Number 185 Wenhua West Road. You are listening at Novel Full.audio. Chapter 3 Number 185 Wenhua West Road. The members of the tour group were all complaining about the bad weather, and the tour guide kept shouting loudly at the team. Everyone, please be careful and don't dare to leave. The ground is slippery, and once you fall and bump, it's not good. The footprints of immortals are ahead. After we finish reading them, we'll go down early. At this moment, I felt a surge of internal anxiety. I drank too much free mineral water in the car and now I can't bear it. I said to Wang Fatty. Wang, I'll find a place to make it convenient for you. You guys go first, and when it's convenient, I'll chase after you. Wang Pengzi didn't take it seriously either. Anyway, there was only this cement step, and it couldn't be lost. After explaining a few words to Wang Pengzi, I left the team and walked towards the small forest not far away. In just 1 or 2 minutes, when I put on my pants and walked out of the small forest, I found that with just 1 pee, the fog had become much denser. In the thick fog, I could only see the scenery 1 or 2 meters away from me. The steps up the mountain are no longer visible, and I can only walk towards them based on my memory. I remember it was only a distance of over 10 meters, but after walking about 100 steps, I didn't find any steps. Is it difficult to make a mistake? I immediately turned around and walked towards the back, intending to return to the small forest and walk out from a different angle. I could probably find the steps. Unexpectedly, after walking back for about 150 steps, he never returned to the forest. I took out my phone and wanted to call Wang Pengzi, only to find that there was no signal at all here at this moment. I was a bit panicked and immediately shouted out Wang Pengzi's name loudly. As soon as he responded, I knew where to go. Brother Wang. Where are you? Brother Wang, can you hear me? Wang Deshang, Wang Fatty, please reply. I shouted for a while, but I never heard Wang Pengzi's response. Now I started to get nervous. It only took me 3 to 5 minutes. Wang Pengzi and his team couldn't hear each other, but why didn't they respond? Since I haven't responded, then I won't wander around. I'll just wait here for the fog to dissipate, or Wang Pengzi and his companions to come down the mountain. I can always hear the sound of dozens of people. Just as I made up my mind to stay here and wait for Wang Pengzi and his companions to come down the mountain, suddenly, I heard someone speaking not far away. Although I couldn't hear what was being said clearly, there must have been someone passing by nearby, and the number of people seems to be quite large at this moment. I regained my energy and shouted in the direction of those who were speaking. Is that Brother Wang? You guys came down the mountain so quickly just now. I shouted my throat out, and you didn't agree. What are you doing on the mountain? Have you also seen Immortals? I shouted a few words in a row, but I never heard the speaker respond. I vaguely heard the voice of Wang Pengzi among the speakers. What are these people up to? Driven by curiosity, I followed the sound of my voice and wanted to see what plane Wang Pengzi was up to. The few people who were speaking walked up the mountain while speaking, and I followed the sound as I walked up. Not long after walking, I found the steps up the mountain. Now I have more confidence in my heart. If the people who are speaking cannot be found, I will just follow the steps down the mountain. It's strange to say that no matter how fast I ran, the few people who spoke kept a certain distance from me, and I tried my best to catch up with them. After walking for about half an hour, just as I was panting and almost unable to move, the voice of someone speaking in front suddenly disappeared. I took another 100 or so steps and suddenly realized that a dilapidated temple had appeared hazily in front of me. At first, I dared to walk to the gate of the dilapidated temple. The plaque on it was too high to see the name of the temple clearly. However, I still saw a blue-painted iron door number pasted on a wooden pillar in front of the temple gate. Number 185 Wenhua West Road. Just as I was wondering what kind of temple it was, the mountain gate in front of me suddenly opened, and then a 27 or 8-year-old Taoist walked out from inside. This Taoist has clear eyebrows and beautiful eyes, and his Taoist robe is also clean. I never expected such a clever person to become a monk. Cold Buting saw me standing in front of the temple gate, and the Taoist was also startled. Sleeping trough. Ba ba. Infinite Heavenly Sovereign, it scared me so much that I almost offended my ancestor. How could there still be someone? It shouldn't be. What's that? This is not a tourist attraction. Tourists are not allowed to leave. Watching this Taoist coax me out, I won't do it anymore. I finally saw a living person, but I had to endure the heavy fog and disperse here. At present, I took the lead and leaned against the temple door with my body, accompanied by a smiling face, saying to the Taoist. Don't intervene, master, take a look at the dense fog all over the mountain. I just left like this. What should I do if I accidentally fall and die? As Shan Tianfang said, you monks sweep the floor without harming the lives of ants, and cherish moths and veil lamps. I'll stay for a while, and when the heavy fog on the mountain clears, I'll go down immediately. I thought I had said 2 good words, and with the heavy fog all over the mountain, this Taoist would still keep me in the temple for a while. I didn't expect the Taoist's head to shake like waves, and as he shook his head, he said. No, if it were in normal times, not to mention staying for a while, it wouldn't be a problem to stay for 3, 5, or 7 days. But it's just not possible today, almsgiver. There is a big event in our temple today and it is really inconvenient to keep guests. You follow the direction of my fingers and walk slowly for 40 minutes before you come down the mountain. It's not me scaring you, staying in our Taoist temple is not good for you. Seeing the little Taoist say nothing to keep me, he still wants to drive me down the mountain. Looking at the white mist behind me, I felt a bit anxious and continued to say to the little Taoist. You, a monk, are unreasonable. Are there any shady things in the temple that you just drive people away in broad daylight? Also, my friend just went in. If you let him in, you won't let me in. Juan, come out and take a look. Hey! Just as I was shouting, the sound of an old man speaking came from the temple. What caused the commotion outside? Gilded gold, let's say you're a waste, you still don't want to listen. You were cut off early in the morning, but ended up letting in one, right? People who are almost 40 are still unable to distinguish between importance and urgency. Quickly send someone in and find him a room to stay. Don't ruin today's big event. Upon hearing the old man's words, the little Taoist sighed and gave me a strange expression before saying, no matter what happens after that, you can't blame me. End of this chapter. Chapter 4. Mist. You are listening at novelfull.audio. Chapter 4. Mist. When speaking, the Taoist turned aside and made way for the entrance to the temple. I didn't think much, thinking that the teacher in the temple, Fu Ci, was kind and left me to temporarily avoid the temple. Just as I entered the mountain gate, I suddenly felt that there was something wrong in my heart. But what's wrong specifically, and I can't explain it myself clearly. After entering the mountain gate, it was only then that I could see clearly what kind of courtyard was inside. In the first courtyard is a Sanqing hall, which should be dedicated to the Taoist Sanqing. However, with the gate closed now, it is unclear what the mud-sculpted Sanqing looks like here. There are 2 rows of side halls on both sides of the east and west, which should be dedicated to other immortals. Following the Taoist towards the courtyard, he said as he walked. Almsgiver, this is an exception for you, but remember, this is a Taoist temple. Luoshen temple, not a monk's temple. My master is most particular about this, don't let him pick on you. That old guy has a mental illness, even killing someone is not illegal. While speaking, he led me into the side hall on the left. Pointing at the side hall filled with miscellaneous items, he said to me. Almsgiver, you stay here. No matter what happens outside, don't peek or go out. I'll personally escort you down the mountain when the major events in the temple are over. As I watched the Taoist named Gilded Gold leave, I stopped him and said. Am I staying here by myself? What about the other people who just came up? It's Wang Fatty and the others. I'll stay with them. Just you. After giving me a glance, Gilded Gold pushed me into the side hall and said. Today, you are the only outsider in the temple, and there are no Wang or Li Fat people. When he spoke, he had already walked out of the side hall. By the time I realized it, the guild had already closed the door and locked it outside. I was a bit panicked when I heard the sound of the door being locked, and I picked at the crack of the door and said to the Gilded Gold. Why did you lock the door? What do you want to do so I won't stay in your view anymore? Can't I leave? Open the door. If it doesn't open, I'll kick it. Seeing that the Gilded Gold had no intention of opening the door, he turned around and walked towards the outside of the Taoist temple. The angle of the door crack limited the view of the outside scenery, and the gilding quickly left my sight. My temper rose and I kicked fiercely at the gate of the side hall. Unexpectedly, looking at the loose and crumbling gate, it was exceptionally sturdy. I kicked 4 or 5 times in a row, listening to a lot of noise, but the 2 doors remained motionless and even kicked my feet in pain. Seeing that I couldn't go out through the gate, I had the idea of using a side hall window. But when I walked to the window, I realized that it was actually made of cast iron, with an iron rod as thick as a rolling pin blocking it. I tried my best to suck the iron rod, but I couldn't pull it down. It's broken, have I been calculated? But what do you plan on me? I am the only child of the world's richest man who has been left behind. This news, which I don't even know about, has been discovered by the old Taoist in the Taoist temple. There are some treasures from our ancestors that can rival our country. My parents forgot to tell me, but the old Taoist here found out and designed to lure me to this haunted place. Just as I was daydreaming, I suddenly realized that the side hall was also beginning to feel foggy. The mist outside unexpectedly drifted into the side hall. I opened the door and looked outside, only to find that the courtyard outside was covered in white flowers and nothing could be seen. What situation is this? From childhood to adulthood, it was the first time I saw fog enter the room. Does this violate natural laws? Hollywood movies dare not shoot like this, right? Just as I was puzzled, the sound of someone walking came from the yard. It seems that a few people walked in from the Taoist temple, walked around the courtyard, and stopped at the entrance of my side hall. As I didn't know who was outside, I didn't dare to ask for help. Instead, I tiptoed back into the corner and cautiously hid. I just hid it here when someone spoke outside the door. How come there's an extra person in the view? This voice sounds like Wang Pengzi, but carefully tasting it still makes some difference. Could it be that the Wang Pengzi I heard speaking in the mist at the foot of the mountain was him? But why did he come in when he had already arrived at the entrance of this temple before me? At this moment, another person's voice rang outside the door. Before speaking, the person sucked in a runny nose before saying. A person accidentally stumbled in. My master has once again been malicious, afraid that he might come down the mountain and collide with something else. At this time let this person stay in the observation, wait for the formation outside to recede, and then let him go down the mountain. It seems like Wang Pengzi's voice, went out, then inexplicably smiled and said. This way, you can accidentally come in. Before this sentence could be finished, the gate of the side hall suddenly opened, and then thick fog surged in instantly. I could feel someone walking into the side hall with the thick fog, but the fog was strange. In this moment, I had reached a point where I couldn't see my fingers. I felt someone approaching me, and even the breath of that person sprayed onto my face. This is almost like putting my face against my face, but I just can't see the person in front of me. Even suddenly reaching out to grab the person in front of him, he made several attempts without touching anything. Little monkey, you have a bit of a devilish mind. A voice that sounded like Wang Pengzi was speaking came from in front of him, and then the person with a runny nose followed suit and said. Up, it's almost time to go back. This can't afford to delay. It seems like Wang Pengzi's voice, rang out, and then his voice suddenly rapped behind my ear, saying. Little monkey, I don't believe you accidentally stumbled in. If you have the ability, continue to stay here. As the person spoke, a warm current sprayed over my head. At that moment, I felt a huge pain in my head, as if it was about to explode at any moment. Fortunately, this excruciating pain only lasted for a moment and then disappeared without a trace. At this moment, I finally couldn't bear it anymore and turned to shout at the mist behind me. Who are you pretending to be, a ghost to scare? If you have the ability, come out and show up, see if I dare to kill you. Upon hearing these two words from me, Wang Pengzi seemed to have heard some funny joke and suddenly burst out laughing. What's so funny? If you don't believe it, come out. Before I could finish speaking, the thick mist in front of me instantly disappeared without a trace. There is still a side hall in front of me that serves as a warehouse. Where is there anyone? I can't believe my eyes. Just now, there was someone in front of me, and I could smell his breath. How could it be gone in an instant? This must be a dream. Yes, Wang Pengzi and I received the debt and drank too much at night. It must have been a dream that we didn't wake up. Thinking of this, in order to prove that I didn't wake up from my dream, I immediately exerted all my strength to give myself a big mouth with a crisp sound. I was hit so hard that stars appeared in my eyes, and a warm stream flowed out of my nostrils. It's not just a dream, he got nosebleeds. End of this chapter. Chapter 5. Strange Figures. You are listening at Novel Full.audio. Chapter 5 Strange Figures. I felt a bit flustered now, and my cold sweat instantly soaked through my clothes. What the hell is this place? The person I was talking to earlier was a ghost. Now is not the time to think about it. Looking at the wide open side hall door, I dare not stay here anymore. At this moment, there was nothing to worry about, and I ran out of the side hall. At this moment, the thick fog outside has dissipated, and the sky has already darkened. I didn't care anymore and pushed open the mountain gate. Just as I was about to step out and run, I was suddenly stunned by the scene in front of me. I saw countless figures standing outside the mountain gate of the Taoist temple. These figures were blurry, as if covered in a layer of gauze mist, and now the sky was gradually getting dark, making it impossible to see their faces clearly. They stood motionless in the direction of the Taoist temple. Not standing. It's him floating around. These figures are more than half a foot off the ground, panting heavily in the direction of the Taoist temple. In addition to human figures, many wild beasts also came running over one after another. These wild beasts can be seen clearly, with deer, wolves, foxes, and even a dozen white rabbits coming to join the fun. These animals, like figures floating in mid-air, face the direction of the Taoist temple with a straight line. The most eerie ones are those foxes, who kneel on the ground like humans, bowing in the direction of the Taoist temple with their two front paws. This scene made me take a deep breath and my body involuntarily tremble. Just as my mind was blank, I didn't know if I should have heard someone running down the mountain or when I was returning to the Taoist temple, the sound of gilding came from behind. I said, "Benefactor, why did you come out on your own? I'm not saying I'll take you with me." As he spoke, Gilded Jean had already walked up to me, as if he hadn't seen the figures and beasts in front of the Taoist temple. After looking up at the sky, the old Taoist pulled me and continued, saying, "It's really past the beginning of autumn, and it's getting dark early. Let's hurry up and get to the foot of the mountain in half an hour." As I watched Gilded Gold pull me towards the crowd of figures, I quickly broke free from him and pointed to the figures and animals in front of me, saying, "Are you going to die? You can't see these things." Before I could finish speaking, a strange expression appeared on the gilded face. He looked up and down at me nervously, then stared at me and said, What did you see? Don't pretend to be blind." I pointed to countless figures and beasts across the street and said, "Don't tell me, you can't see these things. Also, someone entered the room just now. He asked me to stay with you if I had the ability." At this point, the figures and beasts in front of the Taoist temple suddenly moved. They turned their heads together, their eyes fixed on my direction. At this moment, my heart lifted up to my throat again, and my thoughts began to wander in my mind. Is this Taoist temple a legendary black shop? Which wealthy person mistook me for? Intending to use magic to bind my ticket. Seeing that the reaction of the figures and beasts on the opposite side was not right, I immediately spoke soft words to the old Taoist Gilded Gold. "Master, you may have mistaken the wrong person. I am just a migrant worker, and my family still owes the bank over 500,000 yuan in mortgage and car loans. At home, there is also an elderly woman in her 80s, a newly married daughter.in.law, and a child she just brought with her. If something happens to me, it will result in 4 lives all at once. Don't worry, I have a strict mouth. I remember, I have never climbed a mountain at all. I'm just dreaming now, waking up and forgetting everything. Lying down, don't scare me." When I was speaking, I couldn't help but look at the Gilded Taoist beside me, but I was so scared by his appearance that I forgot what I was going to say. Later I saw that the gilded face was facing in the direction of those figures and beasts, and his 2 eyes were actually separated. One eye was fixed on the figure and beast in front of him, while the other eye turned to my direction and stared closely at me. Is this something that humans can do? This old Taoist named Gilded Gold is a monster. Just as I didn't know where to run, my gilded eyes had returned to normal. He grabbed me and turned around, walking into the Taoist temple behind me. Although I am reluctant to hold on to the gilded object like this, I am still more afraid of the figures and beasts at the entrance of the Taoist temple. So, I was brought into the second courtyard of the Taoist temple by gilding and arrived at the entrance of a wing room to the west. We had just walked to the door when we heard a chanting of scriptures coming from inside the wing room. Perhaps hearing the sound of me and Lu Jin approaching, the chanting of scriptures in the room suddenly stopped, and then an old man's voice loudly said, "Gilded, didn't I say I wouldn't have dinner? I have reached a crucial point in my homework this night. Who else is at the door?" Halfway through, the people in the wing room realized that there was an extra person at the door. Gilded immediately explained. "Master, it's the benefactor who accidentally stumbled into the Taoist temple just now. Something happened. I met this person from the higher-ups who just went back." "What's that?" I even gave him a divine eye before the gilded words could be finished. The sound of heavy objects landing came from inside the wing room. Before I could fully understand what had happened inside, someone had already opened the door to the wing room. At the moment the door opened, a foul smell emerged from inside the house. This taste is a bit suffocating, making me feel so strong that I couldn't even breathe. I took 2 steps back. At this moment, an old man with white hair supported his waist and walked out of the room. The old man looked about 70 years old, but his face was surprisingly good. There were no wrinkles, and he was as pink and tender as a little doll. The elderly, like gilded gold, are dressed in Taoist attire, only disheveled. I don't know how long my long gray hair hasn't been washed, but it looks like it's almost sticky. I used a pencil to pin it into a loose and fluffy grip. The Taoist robe on his body is also oily. I don't know how long it hasn't been washed. A foul smell of urine emanates from him. The old Taoist pushed away the gilded metal in front of me, then covered my head with both hands and looked at me with a glance. The smell on his body made me nauseous, but it was strange to say. After retching a few times, the stench on the old Taoist's body quickly disappeared. As the stench dissipated, my panicked state of mind unexpectedly cleared up. After watching for a while, the old man sighed and turned to the gilded gold, saying, "Maul an egg, isn't this just causing trouble? It's okay now, it's not a big deal, it's just a hassle. If it causes trouble above, let's wipe his butt." Maul an egg. End of this chapter. Chapter 6. Nightmares. You are listening at novelfull.audio. Chapter 6 Nightmares. At this point, the old man turned around and glanced in the direction of entering the yard. After hesitating for a moment, the old Taoist changed his smiling face and said to me, "Almsgiver, it's okay. There's nothing wrong with it, but I also need to trouble you to stay overnight in the small temple. Don't worry, when this awakening comes, the changes that happen to you will disappear. Gilded gold, hurry up and tidy up a guest room for the benefactor. Did you not have dinner, benefactor? Can you get some more food? Just give him my share. I also want to ask what exactly happened." The old man has turned around and returned to the wing room. Looking at the gilded figure pulling me outward, he said to him, "Can you explain to me what's going on? What was the shadow at the door just now? Also, just now you told your master that I opened the heavenly eye. What heavenly eye? Did you use me for an experiment? There's no such evil as what you said, benefactor." As gilded gold pulled me towards the courtyard outside, she continued to say, "The fragrance on my face today is not right. My junior brother bought cheap goods. Perhaps you are not accustomed to this fragrance, benefactor. You may have some allergies and hallucinations, which is similar to gas poisoning. Wait for a good night's sleep to breathe, everything will be ready tomorrow morning." While speaking, he took me to the wing room on the first floor of the yard outside. This room is relatively clean, with a marching bed in the corner and a few simple pieces of furniture. There is only one 10W light bulb in the room for illumination, and under the dim light, the room appears eerie. After bringing me in, Gilding made the bed and said to me, "Benefactor, please rest here for a while. I'll go get dinner, you're lucky. Our old ways can all eat meat. Although it's not a delicacy, it's definitely better than cabbage and tofu. As Gilded Gold was about to leave, I quickly stopped him. After experiencing such a strange thing just now, how dare I stay alone in this ghostly place? Don't get involved, please explain what happened earlier before leaving. Do you really want me to stay overnight with you? That won't work. I still have friends waiting at the foot of the mountain. The train home early tomorrow morning. Lu Jin turned around and glanced at me, then pointed to the completely blackened courtyard outside and said, "Benefactor, if you want to leave the Taoist temple, naturally no one dares to stop you. But I have to remind you that there are no streetlights on this Luoshen mountain. I'm going down the mountain in the dark, and it's easy to say if I accidentally stumble. But if I get bitten again by a venomous snake, I'll have to say two things about whether I can go down. Actually, gilding doesn't need to scare me, I dare not go down the mountain at this time." Recalling the eerie scene I saw at the entrance of the Taoist temple just now, I am still sweating profusely. Taking advantage of my stunned moment, the gilded person gave a strange smile and then left the room. After Gilding left, I was the only one left in the room. It seems that I really want to live here tonight. Helpless, I want to call Wang Fatty and tell him about the situation here. Unfortunately, there is still no signal on the phone. It seems that we can only wait for the time when the Gilded Gold comes to deliver the meal and borrow the landline phone from Daoguan to call Wang Fatty. But after waiting for a long time, Lao Dao didn't come to deliver dinner. I was originally thinking of going out to find him, but at this moment, there were sounds of unknown wild beasts coming from around the Taoist temple. The sound was like the crying of a young woman, tearing her heart and lungs. It made goosebumps come out all over my body. Thinking of the eerie scene I saw at the entrance of the Taoist temple before, I became nervous and quickly closed the door, while also inserting the latch. I was certain that no one would come in, so I calmed down and sat on the marching bed. After sitting down, I suddenly smelled an indescribable odor emanating from the room. This smell is neither fishy nor foul-smelling. I don't know how to describe it, but it's not a scent that humans have adapted to. Although it has a slightly better smell than the smell on the old Taoist's body before, smelling it also makes me feel nauseous in waves. There are no windows in this room, and I dare not open the door for ventilation. I can only endure it for now. Just as I was pondering waiting for the Gilded Gold to come back with dinner and say that I wanted to change rooms, I accidentally came across a small incense burner placed in the corner of the wall. This incense burner is full of copper rust and dirt. Without 2 packs of cleaning powder, you won't be able to see its true color. There are also 3 incense sticks stuck on top, just like burnt leftovers. This kind of environment is a good thing. Regardless of whether you respect the gods or not, click on it to dispel the strange smell in the room. I took out a lighter and lit 3 leftover incense sticks. After the smoke dissipated, the strange smell in the room dissipated a lot. I don't know if it's because I was scared too much before, and I got tired when I went up the mountain. After calming down now, a wave of drowsiness hit me, and I half lay and half sat on the marching bed, taking a nap and waiting for the Gilded Gold to come and deliver dinner. I felt like I was staring blankly for more than 10 minutes before suddenly smelling the aroma of stewed meat. I thought it was Gilded Gold coming to deliver dinner, but then I opened my eyes in a daze, only to find out that at some point, a large iron pot with a wrong number had been set up in the room. I have never seen such a large iron pot, it actually occupies half of the room area. I slept so soundly that I didn't even notice how they brought this big iron pot in. But didn't I insert the door latch? There are 2 Taoist priests sitting around the big iron pot, one of whom is the gilded one that brought me in. The other sitting opposite the big iron pot was an old Taoist with a coquettish demeanor on his body, and there was also a Taoist with his back to me. The steam emanating from the big iron pot enveloped this person inside, making it difficult to see his appearance clearly. The old Taoist saw me get up and smiled, pointing to the big iron pot in front of him, saying, "Benefactor, you're really awake. This meat has just been stewed." I was really hungry too. After smelling the aroma of meat all over the room, my stomach started to growl uncontrollably. Do you all have such a good dinner? There must be half a pig here, right? It's a bit luxurious. I smell the aroma of stewed meat. Can such a big pot stew 100 or 200 pounds of meat? While speaking, I jumped out of bed and walked 3 or 2 steps to the big pot. Looking at the sizzling iron pot in front of me, there was a huge piece of meat stewed inside. The sauce red meat skin is facing upwards, and the brown and viscous soup is rolling in the big iron pot. The pungent aroma makes my stomach growl, almost reaching out to grab it. Although I feel a bit hungry, I still need to politely say a few words about the situation. A grand dinner was arranged. I'm a bit embarrassed now. What's that? Before I go down the mountain tomorrow, I have to pay 2 incense coins for my height. Why don't I have to pay 30 or 50? As I spoke, as the sauce rolled over, the pieces of meat in the pot were adjusted and the parts soaked in the soup flipped over. It turned out to be a cooked person. End of this chapter. Chapter 7. Confusion. You are listening at novelfull.audio. Chapter 7. Confusion. The face of this stewed and mushy person was covered in boiled scallions and ginger. After the boiling soup washed away the scallions and ginger, I saw the appearance of this acquaintance and was already frightened. My hair stood upright. Isn't that me? Just as I was shivering, the old Taoist bared his yellow teeth and pointed at me in the big iron pot, saying, "Can you give me a shoulder? It's time to eat now." Ah! I let out a scream of fear and suddenly opened my eyes. There was no other big iron pot or old Taoist in front of me, or that small room. I lay sweating profusely on the marching bed. My clothes have been soaked in cold sweat, and my heart is beating non-stop. After a while of delay, I finally realized that I had just had a nightmare. Is it really a dream? Why does it feel like it's actually happening? Watching the sunlight shining through the crack in the door, I realized it was dawn. Glancing at my phone, I actually slept until 6:30 in the morning. Seeing the sunshine outside, my courage also increased. I walked to the door, pulled open the latch, and walked out of the room. Although it had just started to dawn, the courtyard was already filled with sunlight. The heavy fog from yesterday has already dissipated, and now it seems that this Taoist temple is no longer gloomy. Carefully walked to the mountain gate and peeked out through the crack of the door. The figures and animals I saw yesterday have disappeared without a trace, and under the sunshine, they are no different from ordinary mountains and forests. Just as I was hesitating whether to wait for the gilded group to come over or take advantage of the fact that I was descending the mountain now, the sound of someone speaking rang out in the courtyard. "Gilded gold, where is ginger? This stewed meat without ginger, is it still called stewed meat? Also, go and see if the protagonist has woken up. If you wake up, quickly stew it. More than 100 pounds of meat, why not stew for half a day? Don't use the kitchen knife, how can it split open bones? Use an axe. Chop bones with an axe, and cut meat with a kitchen knife." These few words reminded me of the scene in my dream just now, and my hair suddenly became chilly. Is the dream just now an omen? Listening to the footsteps coming from inside, how dare I stay here? At the moment, he didn't care anymore and rushed straight to the front door. After pushing open the mountain gate, he ran towards the foot of the mountain with all his strength. Just as I ran out of the mountain gate, I heard the sound of gilding coming from behind. "Benefactor, where are you going? Hurry back. We can't go down the mountain yet. There will be a big deal. Big things can only happen if you don't go down the mountain. Are you still waiting for an extra dish for lunch?" Remembering the scene from my dream just now, I used all my strength to nurse and ran frantically down the mountain. On the way, I fell twice due to the speed being too fast, but fortunately, I only scraped a little skin. After getting up, I ran down the mountain again. I ran down the mountain in one breath and happened to encounter a taxi passing by to go to the city. So, after getting into the taxi and watching the car start, even the Taoist on the mountain didn't chase after me. It was only then that my heart, which was hanging, finally returned to my stomach. After calming down, I said to the driver. "Master, go to the Luoshen guest house." After hearing me say my destination, the driver hesitated for a moment and glanced at me in the rearview mirror before saying, "Do you mean the Luoshen guest house? I took it off last year, and now I'm building the Luoshen hotel." Are we both talking about the same place at that time? I was still in a panic and didn't hear the doubts in the driver's words. I thought we were not talking in the same place. The Luoshen guest house is the one next to the long-distance bus station. A 4-story small building, with a video recording hall and a snack bar at the entrance. After I finished speaking, the driver seemed even more confused. He scratched his scalp and said to me while driving, "Brother, how long has it been since you came to Luoshen County? The guest house has long been gone. What's wrong?" "I only had dinner at the guest house yesterday morning." It seems that the taxi driver is not from the local area, most likely he has mixed up with other ghost houses. At the moment, I continued to say to the driver, "Master, just go to the long-distance bus station and when you arrive, you will see the Luoshen guest house. After speaking, I took out my phone and wanted to give Wang Pengzi a call. "I haven't heard from you this night, please make a phone call to report your safety." Unexpectedly, after dialing the phone number, a woman's voice came from the microphone. "Your phone has been shut down. Why did it shut down?" Before going on a business trip, I was afraid that I wouldn't be able to contact my wife at home. I even paid 100 yuan for the phone bill first, and it only took a few days for me to shut down. So, I didn't think much about it. I just thought there was something wrong with the telecom operator, and maybe I'll be fine in a while. After more than half an hour, the taxi finally drove into Luoshen County. Looking at the scenery outside the car window, I vaguely feel that this place seems to be different from what I saw a few days ago, but there is something different that cannot be said. The taxi quickly arrived at the long-distance bus station, paid the fare, and got off. The scene before me made me unable to believe my own eyes. The 4-story guest house was supposed to be across from the long-distance station, but now it has become a construction site under construction. That's right, the video studio on the left and the snack bar on the right, but where is the guest house in the middle? I circled back and forth around the original site of the guest house, but I didn't see any sign of it. Helpless, I walked to the small shop next to the guest house in my memory, pointed to the construction site where construction began, and said to the owner who was looking at the shop, "Big sister, may I ask where the nearby guest house is?" The landlady glanced at me and fiddled with the old second-hand cash register, saying to me, "Returning to the guest house. I stopped working 2 years ago. The county has been upgraded and renovated to build a 3-star hotel. Isn't this? It will be completed by the end of the year. Brother, you haven't been to our Luoshen County for a few years, have you? If you want to stay, go south 1 mile and there is also a guest house where people can stay." When I heard that the guest house had stopped working 2 years ago, my mind was in chaos and I couldn't hear the boss's words clearly. I can't figure out why the guest house disappeared after just staying overnight at the Mountain Taoist Temple. It must be a dream that hasn't woken up yet. Thinking of this, I raised my hand and gave myself a big mouth. With a loud bang, the landlady was startled and looked at me with a nosebleed in shock. "It's not a dream, that's just one thing." After wiping my nose, I saw the public phone on the table. "Anyway, give Wang Pengzi a call first, maybe he knows what's going on." But just as I picked up the phone, I suddenly changed my mind and called my newly pregnant wife. End of this chapter. Chapter 8. 3 Years of Disappearance. You are listening at novelfull.audio. Chapter 8. 3 Years of Disappearance. The phone rang for a long time but was not connected. As a warning tone was about to appear, a familiar woman's voice finally appeared in the microphone. "Who is it?" The environment on the phone is a bit noisy, it seems like an event is being held over there. Upon hearing my wife's voice on the phone, I finally breathed a sigh of relief and said into the microphone, "Who else is there?" "I'm your son's dear father. I promised to call you last night." Before I could finish speaking, a sudden cry of surprise came from the other end of the phone, and then my wife spoke with a tearful tone. Shen Lian. You've been beaten 1,000 times. Where have you died in the past few years? If you run away, don't come back. Why did you choose to call me today? My goodness, why is my life so hard? Before I could figure out what was going on, an old man's voice rang out in the microphone. Shen Lian. Is it my uncle Shen Lian? You child, there hasn't been any news in the past 3 years, and I thought you were dead, isn't that right? I only sold it to you last week. I can tell that the person speaking is my father. Law, but his words are inexplicable. I stayed in the Taoist temple all night. Why did I disappear for 3 years? Before my father. Law could finish speaking, I interrupted him first and said. Dad, what did you say? Why haven't I heard from you in just 3 years? Didn't I call your girl yesterday morning? I also said I will go back in the next few days and bring you some local specialty dragon whip, so that I can have another brother. Law. If you don't believe me, ask your girl. What a mess. My father. Law interrupted my conversation, took a deep breath on the phone, and continued. Shen Lian, I don't care what kind of madness you've been smoking in recent years. Today is a day of great joy for Tsuewen. Finally, there was a young man willing to ask her for a second marriage. Don't cause any trouble. You have been missing for 3 years, and Tsuewen has been waiting for you for 3 years. He has already done his utmost kindness and righteousness. Upon hearing my father. Law's words, I realized that something was wrong. Just now when I heard my wife talk about my account being closed, I thought it was because I didn't call her last night and got into a tantrum with me, but hearing these words now is definitely not a joke. What exactly happened that night? Why is my wife overjoyed again? Who is he so happy with? My mind was about to explode, and suddenly I thought of something even more important. I turned to the microphone and said. Dad, don't make such a joke. I'm still fine. Why is your girl so happy again? To put it bluntly, even if I have been missing for 3 years and my account has been closed, what about our children? The child was born 2 years ago, right? Does she take her child to celebrate? The father. Law on the phone sighed and said. Shen Lian, Tsuewen has been waiting for half a year without any news from you. She doesn't know what happened on your end, nor does she know if you are alive or dead. If you're gone, how can she live alone with her child? You also think for Tsuewen. The child was beaten. After these 2 sentences, my mind went blank and I stood there holding the phone. At this moment, a sudden sound of firecrackers came from the microphone. Then came the voice of my mother. Law. The groom has come to pick up the wedding. Quickly hang up the phone. The phones are all turned off. I'm not allowed to answer any calls. I don't know. Today. Before I could finish speaking, I had already heard a busy tone from the phone in my hand. My wife is really overjoyed again, I said to the shop owner's wife with a wooden expression. What year is today? What month and date is it? The landlady was already frightened by my appearance. She didn't answer, just reached out and pointed to the calendar sign hanging on the wall. March 23, 1898. May 8, 2018. Wang Pengzi and I came to Luoshen County to ask for money on May 8, 2015. I rubbed my eyes and after confirming that I had read correctly, my heart suddenly began to panic and my body involuntarily began to shake. As my body trembled, my clothes were soaked in cold sweat. As if I had forgotten how to breathe, I began to desperately inhale into my mouth and then exhale hard. I haven't eaten anything since yesterday afternoon. The body has already experienced a reaction of hypoglycemia and has been frightened several times. Now it has been inexplicably 3 years since I realized it. I can't accept it for a while, and my body has developed a stress response at this moment. The shopkeeper who noticed something was wrong grabbed me and worried that something might happen in the store. She couldn't explain clearly and quickly helped me sit on a chair. Then he took the phone from my hand and put it away, saying, "Brother, your behavior is not right. You are exactly the same as my younger brother when he was suffering from hysteria. He discovered it early and sent it to the hospital to find a good doctor. It will be fine in a few days. Take the long-distance bus to the city and get off at Wenhua West Road, as instructed by the elder sister. I went to the hospital to find Director Tong. My younger brother was cured by Director Tong while speaking. She helped me out of the small shop and pointed to the long-distance bus station across from me, saying, "That's the car, hurry up and get in a car and go to the city. Remember, get off Wenhua West Road and the hospital is right next to the station." As she spoke, she took me, who was confused, onto the bus heading towards the city. Not long after the landlady paid for my ticket, the bus also arrived and headed towards the city. After the car started driving, I went through everything that happened last night until now in my mind. But the more I think about it, the more I can't understand why 3 years have passed since I only stayed overnight in a Taoist temple. Yesterday morning, I even kissed my wife. Why did I have another big celebration with someone else? Poor my unborn child, who has not yet seen this world and is lost in a daze. The more I thought about it, the more uncomfortable I felt. It seemed like I was about to get into the corner of an ox, and my mind was about to collapse. The ticket seller on the bus said, "Wenhua West Road has arrived. Passengers getting off at Wenhua West Road, please prepare to get off in advance." Wenhua West Road is the hospital address that the shop owner told me, but why is it so familiar? It seems like I've heard of it somewhere before. Compared to having a separated wife and children, perhaps getting hysteria is actually better. Perhaps you have found the right doctor, take a few pills, and then have a good sleep. When you wake up, everything may be normal. I may not have come to Luoshen County at all. There are some strange Taoist priests in the Taoist temple, and these inexplicable 3 years are just a dream. I got off the train in a daze and saw a relatively small hospital next to the station at a glance. I walked unsteadily to the entrance of the hospital. Before I could see the name of the hospital clearly, I was attracted by the door number on the doorpost. The blue painted iron sheet house number is 185, Wenhua West Road. Isn't this the door number in front of that eerie Taoist temple? Is this hospital also an illusion? I never left the hallway at all. Just as my head was about to explode, a person walked out of the hospital. This person is wearing a Taoist robe, at the age of 20.7 or 8, with clear eyebrows and beautiful eyes, which is exactly the gilded appearance in the Taoist temple. End of this chapter. Chapter 9. Back and Forth. You are listening at novelfull.audio. Chapter 9. Back and Forth. I have experienced several scares this night, and there is also some hypoglycemia in Shuimi without teeth. After seeing the gilded gold, I couldn't withstand the blow anymore. After shaking my body a few times, my eyes turned black and I knew nothing. I don't know how long I've been unconscious, but I heard someone speaking in a daze. "Gilded, I know you're not easy either, bringing people back from the city. But this matter is too big, someone needs to take on the responsibility. How about you guys guess the punches? Whoever loses will take the blame. If it's not a big deal, I'll plead with the higher-ups and say that this kid ran away on his own, but we didn't stop him. The above will not do anything to you, it will only damage your lifespan of 3 to 5 years. Didn't the appointment from 2 years ago calculate your fate for both of you? Jingqi, you still have 60 years of life, gilded for 61 years. I'll ask for a favor for you again, at most for 3 to 5 months." This sounds like an old Taoist in the Taoist temple. Have I ever dreamed of returning to the temple? Just as I was skeptical in my heart, I heard the sound of gilded sighs and then said, "Last time, Master, you wanted to sign after the stars, which caused your superiors to get lost. It was our brothers who carried the blame. As a result, both of us lost half a year of our lifespan." As Gilded spoke, someone beside him sniffed a few times. The person grumbled their nose and whispered something in a low voice. The old Taoist heard his words and turned to him, saying, "What do you mean by Jingqi? What does it mean that the wheel is also my turn? My uncle raised you up with a bunch of shit and urine, and now it's time for you to repay your kindness. What did my older sister say while holding your hands before leaving? Let you take care of my uncle. Your mother has only been dead for over 20 years, so you are not obedient anymore. My poor old sister, take a look at you two white-eyed wolf sons. If my wings are hard, I want to fly. Why don't you take me with you? As I was speaking, a loud noise suddenly came from my ear, causing me to open my eyes abruptly. In front of me is still a room in the Taoist temple where I stayed overnight. The old Taoist, along with gilded gold and another Taoist with his back to me, sat by my bed. The old Taoist was a bit excited when he spoke, and the spittle and stars had already sprayed on my face. Just now, he excitedly patted my bed and woke me up. Originally, the old Taoist was crying and making a fuss about his two disciples' nephews, but when he saw me wake up, he immediately changed his face and walked over with a kind expression on his face. After helping me sit up, he said, "Benefactor, you finally woke up. I've been sleeping all day and night, and I'm so scared that the old Taoist is scared." "How can you think you have a mental illness? Don't be afraid, it's not a big deal. You just ran around in the morning and broke the formation of the Taoist temple. But when can't you go down the mountain? It's just that when you're about to leave, our Taoist temple can also be considered a part of the heavenly court. There is a saying that 1 day in the sky and 3 years in the human world. You missed the good time of the next 3 years." At this moment, my consciousness was still a bit blurry, and I couldn't understand what the old Taoist was saying. I just stared at the 3 Taoists in front of me in a daze. The old Taoist, seeing many things and knowing many things, immediately said to his 2 disciples, "Hurry up, bring over a bowl of porridge and add 2 more spoons of brown sugar." While the old Taoist priest was speaking, the guild had already filled a bowl of white rice porridge with 2 tablespoons of brown sugar and sent it to me. I was also extremely hungry, and at this moment I couldn't think about why it had disappeared for 3 years. After I took the rice porridge, I devoured it. After a bowl of brown sugar rice porridge, my consciousness was restored. I'm just hungry for several times. This bowl of congee is really not good. When Gilding saw it, he filled a bowl of rice porridge with brown sugar and sent it to me. When the bowl of congee was half eaten, the old Taoist smiled at me and said, "After finishing this bowl of porridge, the old Taoist, I have a few more words to say." "So what?" "Donor, you and I have a fate, how about that? Be a master to me. I don't have any other skills, but I can teach you how to become an immortal." Before the old Taoist could finish speaking, I turned around and sprayed half a bowl of porridge from my mouth all over his face. Before the old Taoist could react, I rolled my eyes and collapsed straight onto the bed. This frightened the 3 Taoists. The old Taoist quickly came over to check my pulse, and then said to the 2 disciples, "I said he was hungry several times, can't he handle this little porridge? You don't listen. That's it, this kid can't feel his pulse anymore. We can't let this person die in the Taoist temple. The 2 little ancestors, hurry up and dig a pit outside the temple to bury it. Don't empty-handed, go get a shovel and a pickaxe. Do you 2 still want to dig empty-handed?" While he was chattering, Gilded Gold and another Taoist had already lowered their heads and walked out of the room. After the 2 young Taoists left, the old Taoist turned around and glanced at me. Perhaps it's because I've already breathed my last breath. The old Taoist lived in the same room as a dead person, and he felt a bit uncomfortable. The old Taoist walked to the door and leaned against the frame, muttering to himself. "Dust returns to dust, soil returns to soil. This injustice has its head and its owner. You are not the old Taoist who caused me to die. I also said I wanted to take you as an apprentice, but unfortunately, your fortune is too thin. Tomorrow, I will do a ritual for you, an old Taoist, to give you a bright future in the afterlife." Just as the old Taoist was speaking, I sat up again silently. Just now I was pretending to faint, and I didn't expect this old Taoist with 2 knives to think I was dead. The bowl of rice porridge that I had just drunk was effective, and my blood sugar was not low at this time. I went to bed barefoot and crept behind the old Taoist priest. He picked up the gilded stool he had just sat on and slammed it into the back of the old Taoist's head. Now I have determined that all of this is caused by 3 Taoist priests. Although I haven't figured out what's going on, it's not wrong to first control this old thing. After being hit by a stool, the old Taoist fell silently to the ground. Watching the old Taoist's chest rise and fall slightly, it seemed that he was not in any major trouble. I didn't hurry to run out of the Taoist temple immediately. I turned around and picked up the casserole with rice porridge. After drinking half a pot of rice porridge, I wiped my mouth, crossed the old Taoist's body and ran toward the Taoist temple. Just as I stepped out of the room, what was supposed to be the location of the Taoist temple courtyard suddenly turned into the room I had just stayed in. In front of me was a marching bed, several stools, and a small pot of rice porridge. Underneath my feet is the unconscious body of the old Taoist. What's going on here? Why did the yard become inside the house? Looking back, behind me was the courtyard at the entrance of the Taoist temple. Could it be that I just turned around and my back turned into front of me? Or am I suffering from hysteria again? What room and yard are all hallucinations? End of this chapter. Chapter 10. Immortals. You are listening at novelfull.audio. Chapter 10. Immortals. At present, I slowly step back. Looking down at my feet as I walked into the courtyard, I took 7 or 8 steps back. Just as I thought it was almost time to turn around, the scene in front of me, which was originally the courtyard, instantly returned to the room. Although he returned to the room, the old Taoist who had fallen to the ground disappeared without a trace. At this moment, beads of sweat appeared on my forehead. I have turned around more than 10 times, but every time I turn around, the result is that the yard and the house have changed positions, thinking that those 2 little Taoists are coming back soon. Seeing their master uncle lying on the ground, it's uncertain what reaction they will have towards me. If it really doesn't work, I'll go back to bed and lie down. Just pretend that the old Taoist was knocked unconscious by someone else, and when he bites me to death, I'm unconscious and nothing. Just as I was about to go back to bed and pretend to be dead, Ling Buting noticed a little Taoist sitting on the marching bed where I had just been lying, grinning at me. Compared to the handsome and somewhat excessive gilding, the little Taoist in front of me is really shabby. This person is about the same height as gilded gold, but has a face similar to that of adult Tang children. On his chubby white face, he had 2 black bean-like eyes set in. On the left half of the face, there are circles of psoriasis, while on the right half, there are countless pockmarks. The little Taoist opened his mouth and gave me a silly smile. With this mouth, brushed saliva flowed down the corner of his mouth. I recognize it. This is the little Taoist who has been turning his back to me just now. The shabby little Taoist wiped the saliva from the corner of his mouth with his sleeve, and while giggling at me, he said, "Is it fun? Is it like having a dream? Just like this house, I can't tell which side is inside and which side is outside." When the little Taoist spoke, I felt as if I had heard this voice somewhere before. Before the little Taoist could finish speaking, I suddenly interrupted him and pointed at his nose, saying, "It's you. It's you. Last night, the 2 people who broke into the house in the thick fog to scare me, one of whom is you. You said I accidentally came in, didn't you?" "Jia jia jia jia." The ugly old Taoist let out an owl-like laughter in his mouth, and after a few laughs, he said, "No wonder that superior said you were interesting and remembered my voice with just 1 sentence. My master was originally thinking of fabricating a lie to deceive you. But what is fake, at most it will deceive you for 3 or 5 more years. When you taste it again, the excitement will be even greater and you will have to live and die. It's better to be honest and tell you the truth directly. It's up to you whether you can accept it or not." Speaking of which, the ugly old Taoist slowly got out of bed and walked up to me with a smile. I took out a crumpled pack of cheap cigarettes from my pocket, pulled out a cigarette from inside, and handed it to me. After hesitating for a moment, I still took the cigarette. The ugly Taoist took out a lighter to light my cigarette and smiled as he said, "Are you not afraid of me drugging in the cigarette?" Perhaps after smoking this cigarette, you will be friends with the world. I took a puff at the face of the ugly Taoist and said, you don't need to waste a cigarette if you want to be my 3 friends. When I was lying in bed just now, you could be my 3 friends anytime, anywhere. Jia jia jia. The ugly old Taoist once again let out an owl-like laughter, and after he finished laughing, he also lit a cigarette himself. After taking a sip, Cho Lao Dao said to me, "Since you are all cooperating like this, then I won't talk nonsense. There are 2 explanations for your experiences in the past few days, scientific and non-scientific. Which one would you like to hear?" After taking a deep breath, I threw my half-smoked cigarette on the ground and said, "If you were me, which explanation would you choose?" Jia jia jia. After listening to my words, the ugly Taoist laughed again. He smiled and patted my shoulder, saying, "You've really stumped me. Otherwise, let your 3 friends go." Although I knew the ugly Taoist was joking, I couldn't help but take a step back and distance myself from him. The ugly Taoist tilted his head to look at me, then continued with a smile. "Let's not talk about the illusions that occur after the distortion of time and environment in Einstein's theory of general relativity. Let's get to the point directly. Do you believe in immortals in this world?" I didn't expect the ugly Taoist to directly lead the topic to immortals and say to him, "Actually, I can't believe what you said about ghosts hitting walls and covering the eyes. There's no need to bring it up to the gods. You speak like a fairy, but if you take too big a step, I'm afraid you won't be able to round up later. If it's round but not round, you need to take it first and listen to me finish speaking." The ugly Taoist waved his hand and continued, saying, "Have you ever heard of a day in the sky and 3 years in the human world? Some people mistakenly stumbled upon the Immortals' cave and stayed inside for a day before returning to the human world for 3 years." Before the ugly Taoist could finish speaking, I interrupted him and said, "Do you say all 3 of you are immortals? Don't make a fuss. I have read Journey to the West and the list of deities. Immortals are not like you. That must be a fairy tale." One by one, white-bearded old man, an old lady, and so on. The ugly Taoist gave me a smirk and said, "Let me finish speaking. When you entered the Taoist temple the day before yesterday, you happened to encounter a deity who had descended to earth. The immortal played a small joke on you. Originally, all you had to do was stay honest. The next morning, when the ban on the Taoist temple was lifted, you could go down the mountain and reunite with your family. Nothing will happen afterwards. Unfortunately, before the ban was lifted, you ran down the mountain yourself, benefactor. The result is that you implicated our Taoist masters and disciples and were wiped out for 3 years without any reason." As I listened to the ugly Taoist's words getting increasingly wrong, I quickly interrupted him and said, "Wait a minute, okay? Did you blame me for the blame? Hey buddy, you're going a bit too far. Is it all my own fault that my wife and children are separated?" The ugly Taoist squinted his eyes and looked at me, saying, "Benefactor, did my junior brother stop you when you entered the Taoist temple? Did you say that there is a big event in the Taoist temple today and you cannot come in? When you threw it out in the morning, he chased after you again, saying that if you had gone down the mountain at that time, something big would have happened. If you had listened to him, you wouldn't be the same as you are now." After listening to the words of the ugly Taoist, I quickly said, "Not right. That's also to blame your junior brother for gilding. Tell me earlier that you have immortals here and let me stay honest. Don't worry about whether I believed it or not at the time. He never said that the immortals came to you. If I leave without permission, it will cause such a big trouble." Right upon hearing me say this, the ugly Taoist once again laughed, "Jia jia jia." After laughing, he stared at me and said, "So, benefactor, you believe there are immortals in this world, right?" End of this chapter.